About the risks, it's unpredictable, but I must choose this way. I would rather take the chance instead of staying here and being on the chopping board.
Protesters risking everything to leave their home. It's been a year since Hong Kong was gripped by violent street demonstrations, and a month since the national security law was introduced. Since Hong Kong was returned to China in 1997, the territory has been living on borrowed time. And I've seen this city shift at an extraordinary pace in just 4 weeks. Hong Kong is facing a third wave of the coronavirus, so the government says it's necessary to postpone the upcoming election by a year. It comes in the wake of a newly introduced national security law. The fear is that both are being used by Beijing to take back greater control of this semi-autonomous city. Hong Kong is a Chinese city unlike any other. It was promised certain political freedoms for 50 years after the handover. Pro-democracy activists say those freedoms are now being stripped away. They say the coronavirus and the new national security law are being used as political weapons. On July 1st, Beijing imposed a new stringent security law. It gives the Communist Party extensive powers and is wide-ranging. It criminalises anything that can be deemed as state subversion. Many feel their freedoms are under threat. This young protester, who we are calling Aho, says he's facing certain imprisonment. He is a frontliner involved in many street battles with the police. He wants to leave Hong Kong for fear of what this new law could mean for him.
What I worry about the most is not what I have already been charged with, but what I could be charged and convicted with in the future.
The city has seen more than 9,000 protesters arrested since last year. Nearly 4,000 are students. More than 1,000 are under 18. These are Hong Kong's new political criminals. They see themselves as refugees. The Hong Kong government says they need to face the consequences of their actions.
What Hong Kong has become today is a tragedy. It's changed from a prosperous financial centre with freedom to what we see today. It's because of the suppression from the Chinese Communist Party on democracy and freedom. Their tactics are to extinguish dissidents. It's forced us to fight against them. We have no other way in order to secure our safety.
The BBC has been told by activists that there are more than 500 protesters who have already fled Hong Kong. Some are smuggled out of the city to avoid arrest and imprisonment. But there are others who say it's important for them to stay. Joshua Wong is one of Hong Kong's most prominent activists. 2 weeks ago, he submitted his application to run. We've spent time with Joshua over the last 2 weeks. The 23-year-old says since the national security law was introduced, he's been followed by unknown vehicles. He fears arrest is imminent.
We are fighting for freedom and democracy, and more important is our personal safety. Why we continue to fight in Hong Kong is we hope to have freedom from fear and overcome the threat generated by the authorities.
The BBC filmed footage of what appears to show Joshua being followed by 3 vehicles. They were seen following him from a car park, seen once again in another part of the city, and at Joshua's final destination. He suspects they are agents from the new National Security Agency.
Yeah, I recognized that car traced on me at Hong Kong Island 2 weeks ago, and that 7-seat private car traced on me again last week at Wong Tai Sin.
We checked the number plates with a database run by activists of cars that have been known to follow protesters. One of them had been identified before.
Mainland-style Asian police detention and prosecution are those things never experienced by Hong Kongers in the previous day. I hope I might not be the first one to experience such crackdown and threats from the authorities.
Pro-democracy candidates like Joshua Wong were then disqualified from the election. The next day, the election itself was postponed. The authorities say that Hong Kong is on the verge of a major coronavirus outbreak. Beijing has sent medical staff to support Hong Kong's hospital system, which the government fears could be overrun. The city has seen over 100 new cases every day, for more than a week.
押後4年一度嘅立法會換屆選舉。
But for candidates like Gwyneth Ho, who was also disqualified, this is all too convenient.
The government is now using the COVID-19 pandemic as an excuse to defer the elections. But we know, even under the COVID-19 pandemic, we see places like South Korea, we see places like Singapore and a lot of nations in Europe that they can still carry on with their elections just with like additional precautionary measures.
The streets of Hong Kong, once packed with protesters, now lie silent. The movement seems paralysed by the changes. Pro-Beijing lawmaker Christopher Chung agreed to meet me shortly after the election was postponed. I put it to him that the decision to delay the election was political.
冇樣都政治化啦，係咪？即係擺喺我哋眼前就係市民嘅安全。
We shouldn't politicise everything. Which is more important, the health of the population or the election? Of course, the public health is more important. If we can't deal with the public health properly, our status as the international financial centre would be affected as well.
Horace Chung is the deputy of the largest party in Hong Kong. The Beijing loyalist says the national security law and delays to the election are apolitical.
Actually, we postponed the election because of the pandemic situation in Hong Kong, and we will still have a democratic election in the coming year. So I would not share the view that it's the end of the democracy in Hong Kong.
For young Hong Kong protesters that held this city ransom last year, many no longer feel they have a place to call home. Those that have fled may never be allowed to return, and those that have stayed say the city is now unrecognisable.